Welcome, the anointed ones. Jealousy is the unpaid compliment of the weak. Chosen ones, before you even open your mouth, before you even explain who you are or what you've been through, you've already made people uncomfortable. The fact is, studies show most people compare themselves to others at least once every 10 minutes, and that's in everyday settings. Now imagine what happens when you walk into the room carrying not just presence, but survival, vision, and strength they can't copy. Their measuring stick bends, their composure cracks, and suddenly your very existence feels like an attack on their identity. And here's the part they'll never admit. You're making more impact than you think, even in the moments you doubt yourself. You could be sitting at home in sweats, eating cereal straight out of the box, and still someone's scrolling through your life like it's the finale of their favorite drama series, mad, jealous, and taking notes on your every move. The irony? You didn't apply for this role, yet here you are, shaping destinies, shifting rooms, and sparking envy without even clocking in. So buckle in, because we're about to pull back the curtain on why people are really upset with you, and why your influence runs deeper than you've dared to believe. This isn't about ego, it's about truth. And the truth is, you've become the storm they never saw coming. Number 1. Your existence forces them to confront their own mediocrity. Your existence forces people to confront their own mediocrity in ways they can't escape. It's not because you're out here bragging, rubbing success in their faces, or even trying to prove a point. It's because the way you live quietly exposes what they've settled for. When someone has talked themselves into believing that good enough is all there is, standing next to someone who keeps pushing, evolving, and growing without apology feels like a spotlight burning down on all their compromises. You're not competing with them, but you are holding up a mirror, and in that reflection they see a version of themselves they abandoned years ago. This is where the jealousy grows. People don't get mad because you're perfect. They know you've had your share of failures, struggles, and setbacks. What eats at them is that you didn't stop there. You kept building, you kept learning. You didn't use hardship as an excuse to stay stuck. And every time they see you moving forward, it drags up the guilt of the moments they quit on themselves. That guilt is heavy, and instead of turning it into motivation, they turn it into bitterness aimed at you. It's a strange thing. You didn't come to judge anyone, but your life naturally becomes a measuring stick. People watch how you've survived storms they couldn't endure, and how you've created progress with fewer resources than they had. That contrast is brutal for them. They start to wonder, if they can do it, what's my excuse? And since most people hate asking themselves hard questions, they shift the blame onto you. Suddenly you become too much, arrogant, or lucky, when really you're just living in a way that refuses to shrink. The truth is, people would rather point out your flaws than admit their own laziness. They would rather paint you as the problem than accept that they gave up on themselves. That's why your very existence bothers them. It calls out what they chose not to fight for. And here's the kicker. You're not even trying to make an impact in those moments. You're just being you. But being you is enough to tear down the illusions others have built for comfort. That's the kind of influence that can't be faked. And it's also the reason why jealousy will always follow you. Number 2, your impact is felt in silence before it's seen in public. Your impact is felt in silence long before it ever shows up in public. The truth is, you shift atmospheres without having to make noise, and that's exactly what unsettles people the most. They can't quite explain it, but they feel different when you walk into a space. Conversations change direction, energy rearranges itself, and suddenly there's a tension in the air that wasn't there before. It's not about popularity or being the loudest voice in the room. It's the invisible weight you carry that commands attention. That weight is presence, and presence is something you can't fake or buy. What makes it powerful is that most people spend their lives trying to get noticed. They bend themselves out of shape, chase approval, and fight for scraps of validation, yet their efforts barely stick. Meanwhile, You're not chasing anything, but you leave fingerprints on people's minds without saying a word. That silent kind of impact lingers. Long after you've left, people are still replaying what you said, or even the way you carried yourself when you didn't say anything at all. That kind of imprint is more threatening than flashy achievements, because it's not built on show. It's built on essence. The reason it sparks jealousy is because people know deep down that they can't manufacture it. They can copy your style, mimic your words, or try to outshine you, but they'll never be able to replicate the atmosphere you bring with you. Presence is born from everything you've survived, everything you've healed from, and the authenticity you refuse to compromise on. That's why it speaks louder than any performance ever could. It's not a mask. It's the real you, and the real you unsettles the false versions of others. This is where the hidden impact comes in. You don't always see the ripple effect of what you carry, but other people feel it. Some are inspired, some are intimidated, and some are outright envious because they know they'll never command a room the way you do without even trying. Your silence exposes their noise. Your groundedness exposes their chaos. And your presence alone is proof that real power doesn't need constant explanation. It simply is. That's why you're making more impact than you thought, because what you carry can't be contained by words, yet it changes everything around you. Number 3. They're jealous of the way you survived things that should have broken you. They're jealous of the way you survived things that should have broken you, and that's where the resentment really starts. Most people expect pain to leave scars so deep that you never fully recover. They expect trauma to keep you bitter, to keep you small, to keep you forever marked as a victim. But you did the unthinkable. You walked through fire, and instead of smelling like smoke, you came out stronger, sharper, and more unshakable than before. That survival alone is a testimony. And for some people, it's unbearable to witness because it destroys the narrative they were counting on. Your strength reminds them of their own weakness. They saw you go through things they know would have crushed them, and it stirs a mix of admiration and envy they don't know how to handle. On one hand, they can't deny that your resilience is impressive. On the other hand, it forces them to face the fact that they folded in situations far less difficult than yours. That contrast burns. It makes them feel exposed, and instead of applauding your growth, they let jealousy cover their shame. The real sting is that you didn't just survive, you transformed. You didn't just crawl out of the pit, you built wisdom, strength, and a deeper sense of purpose from the pain. Many people never get past the hurt. They stay stuck in cycles of self-pity or anger, and when they see you thriving after worse, it confronts their excuses head-on. That's when bitterness creeps in. It's easier for them to resent you than to admit they didn't have the courage to heal. This is why your survival makes such an impact. Without even realizing it, you've become living proof that pain doesn't have to be the end. You carry a kind of authority that can't be faked. An authority that only comes from surviving the very things meant to bury you. That authority changes how people see you, how they respond to you, and even how they talk about you when you're not around. It makes them jealous because they can't figure out how you turn tragedy into strength while they're still wrestling with the same old wounds. At the heart of it, your survival shatters illusions. It shows that resilience isn't reserved for the lucky. It's the result of refusing to give up. And when people see that you refuse to bow to circumstances, it unsettles them, because deep down, they know they could have done the same. Number 4, your vision is larger than their entire reality. Your vision is larger than their entire reality, and that alone makes them uneasy. Most people operate in the small, safe boxes of life, worries about bills, the latest gossip, keeping routines they've convinced themselves are enough. That's their world, their entire reality. And it's predictable, manageable, and most importantly, unchallenging. Then there's you, moving on levels that stretch beyond their comprehension. You think in terms of possibilities, impact, and growth that don't fit into their neat little maps. That kind of thinking destabilizes their comfort zones because it's impossible to ignore. They're not jealous of what you own, your titles, or even your outward achievements. The envy comes from the fact that your mind refuses to shrink to fit theirs. While they've made peace with limitations, you've made peace only with potential, and that contrast exposes the narrowness of their thinking. Watching someone expand while they remain stagnant triggers a subtle panic. They realize that no matter how much they try to control or criticize you, your vision continues to outpace their grasp. Your way of seeing the world also forces them to notice what they've ignored. Every time you speak, act, or even plan quietly, it reminds them of the bigger game they aren't playing. That's uncomfortable. Most people cope with this by projecting negativity onto you, labeling your ambition as arrogance, or calling your focus obsessive. What they fail to understand is that your vision isn't a competition. It's just how your consciousness operates. You live on a plane of expansion, and that makes them feel small, trapped, and frustrated without even realizing why. The jealousy peaks because your perspective is freedom in motion. You aren't bound by the timelines, fears, or limited thinking that control them. They can see it, they can feel it, but they can't replicate it. Your ideas, your dreams, your strategies, they move faster than their resistance. And every step you take highlights the boundaries they've accepted in their own lives. That kind of impact is invisible yet undeniable. It ripples through the people around you, subtly challenging, quietly shifting, and leaving them aware that their reality will never match yours unless they expand themselves. You don't need to prove anything, because the difference is already clear. Your mind doesn't shrink, and that alone makes you both inspiring and infuriating to anyone stuck in the smallness of their own world. Number 5. They envy the attention you don't even ask for. They envy the attention you don't even ask for because it highlights how effortless your presence is compared to their struggle. You don't need to perform, to shout, or to force people to notice you. Your energy naturally draws them in. People gravitate toward you, listen when you speak, and follow your lead without you having to demand it. That effortless pull exposes the truth they've been hiding. No amount of scheming, bragging, or manipulation can generate the same magnetic pull you carry naturally. For many, life is a constant hustle for visibility. They chase recognition, calculate their every move, and measure their worth by the applause they receive. They think attention is earned through noise, tactics, or positioning. Then they encounter you, and all that work suddenly looks small. You command influence without calculation, and that threatens them because it proves their efforts are often hollow. The attention you attract isn't about your status, possessions, or external validation. It comes from something deeper: authenticity, consistency, and the quiet confidence that you exist fully in your truth. The jealousy builds because they can see it in real time. They watch as people naturally gravitate toward your ideas, your energy, your presence, and it stings. They notice the ease with which others engage with you while they've been scrambling for scraps. It's not about luck. It's about a natural alignment between who you are and the impact you create. That kind of connection can't be bought, copied, or faked, and that makes them uncomfortable. At the core, they resent that you don't have to bend, perform, or compromise to gain notice. Your visibility isn't transactional. It isn't forced. It comes from being fully yourself and showing up consistently, even when you don't realize the effect you have. That effortless recognition challenges everything they've been taught about power, influence, and control. It's a reminder that trying too hard will never outshine someone who simply radiates authenticity. They envy the attention you don't even ask for because it exposes their struggle for approval. Every glance, every nod, every ear turned toward you is proof that influence is not about desperation. It's about alignment, presence, and the unshakable certainty of who you are. And they can't manufacture that, no matter how hard they try. Number 6. Your authenticity makes their masks itch. Your authenticity makes their masks itch because you operate on a level of truth they can't fake. You don't shapeshift to please, manipulate, or fit in. You show up as exactly who you are, without edits, filters, or pretenses. That raw honesty is uncomfortable for people who've spent years building identities on lies, half-truths, and appearances. When you're around, their carefully crafted personas start to crack. Every word you speak, every action you take, silently exposes the gap between who they pretend to be and who they actually are. That exposure is unbearable for them, so jealousy becomes their default defense. They've invested heavily in illusions, thinking that projecting strength, charm, or success would shield them from scrutiny. You make those illusions wobble because your presence doesn't conform to pretense. You don't validate their narratives, you don't perform for them, and you certainly don't play their games. And that's terrifying for someone who built their identity on others buying into the act. Your authenticity is a mirror, whether you intend it or not, reflecting back everything they hoped no one would see. Envy in this case is almost instinctive. They can't dismantle your truth without attacking you, so they attack it with resentment. The more unapologetically real you are, the more their discomfort grows. They feel exposed, vulnerable, and inferior because you've mastered something they haven't, the ability to exist without needing permission, approval, or applause. You've built yourself from a place of honesty, and nothing about that can be faked or borrowed, which makes it untouchable to those still hiding behind masks. Your authenticity also challenges the social structures they cling to. People who operate with pretense rely on manipulating perceptions to feel powerful or important. You bypass all of that because your influence doesn't depend on others believing a story. It comes from substance, not fabrication. And when substance meets facade, the facade starts to itch, twist, and unravel. That's why they envy you. You don't just make waves, you expose stagnation, dishonesty, and insecurity with nothing more than being yourself. Being real in a world full of masks isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. And for those wearing facades, watching someone thrive without pretense is a constant reminder of what they lack and can never truly replicate. Number 7. You make them feel replaceable without trying. You make them feel replaceable without trying. And that's the kind of quiet power that rattles people more than any words ever could. It's not about arrogance or showing off, it's just reality. Your presence, your decisions, and the way you carry yourself demonstrate a level of independence that most people secretly fear. They rely on constant validation, approval, and attention to feel significant. You, on the other hand, operate from a place where your worth isn't tied to anyone else's recognition. That alone is threatening because it reminds them of their own dependence and insecurities. When people see you thriving without needing anyone to prop you up, it creates a subtle panic in them. They notice that your connections, relationships, and influence are not born out of desperation. You don't bend, manipulate, or overextend yourself to be accepted. You simply exist fully, and that exposes their constant efforts to cling, control, or curry favor. They realize they could be swapped out, forgotten, or bypassed, and there's nothing they can do to prevent it, because your stability doesn't hinge on them. That realization is uncomfortable, and envy quickly fills the space where fear lives. The independence you carry also redefines expectations around loyalty and relevance. While others scramble to prove themselves, you operate from the understanding that you're not replaceable in essence, even if roles, titles, or situations change. That kind of self-reliance highlights the fragility in those who can't stand alone. They've built their confidence on dependency, on making themselves indispensable through manipulation, attention-seeking, or control. And your existence bypasses all of that effortlessly. This is why your calm, assured presence stings. You don't need to make them feel small. It happens naturally because your strength makes them reassess their own importance. You stand alone, And the truth of that independence is more powerful than any argument, confrontation, or display of dominance. Their jealousy comes not from your actions, but from the quiet, undeniable reality that your stability, influence, and self-worth exist entirely outside of them. Being unshakably independent in a world full of dependence is rare, and for those who rely on others for validation, watching someone thrive without it is a constant reminder of what they lack. Your ability to stand alone isn't just freedom. It's a mirror reflecting their insecurity, and that mirror burns. Number 8. Your transformation made their stagnation look like failure. Your transformation made their stagnation look like failure, and that's a truth most people will never say out loud. They've built entire identities around staying the same, convincing themselves that their routines, habits, and choices are just fine. Then you come along, evolving at a pace they can't comprehend, shedding old versions of yourself like worn-out clothes and stepping into new levels of strength, wisdom, and confidence. Every time you rise, it highlights just how long they've been standing still. They don't hate your growth because it's flashy. They hate it because it makes their excuses impossible to believe. Transformation has a way of making everything around it visible. When you evolve, it shines a light on the gaps in everyone else's lives. It shows who's doing the work, who's still clinging to comfort zones, and who's secretly hoping life will change without them ever changing. People see you leveling up, and it makes their same old habits look not just stagnant, but small and pathetic. Instead of letting that light inspire them to grow, they turn bitter because bitterness is easier than accountability. The deeper sting comes from the fact that you didn't evolve under perfect conditions. You didn't wait until it was convenient. You didn't have all the support, resources, or applause. You just decided to grow, and you did. That decision exposes the lie that circumstances are what hold people back. It proves that the real block is their own unwillingness to change. So rather than face that, they project resentment onto you. They make up stories about you being lucky or privileged, because it's easier than admitting you simply had the courage to move. Every new version of you is a silent rebuke to their old excuses. It unsettles them to see you doing what they swore was impossible or unnecessary. It challenges the comfort they've mistaken for success. That's why, instead of cheering for you, some people withdraw or start whispering behind your back. Your evolution is a mirror they're not ready to look into. And here's the quiet power of your transformation. It's not even about proving them wrong. It's about becoming who you were meant to be. But in the process, your growth reveals their stagnation for what it really is. Not safety, but failure, disguised as stability. And that truth burns. Number 9. They hate that your presence is still talked about after you leave. They hate that your presence is still talked about after you leave because it proves your influence doesn't depend on being physically there. You can step out of a room, a conversation, or even a situation, and the energy you leave behind lingers. People continue to replay your words, your gestures, your impact, and even the way you shifted the atmosphere. That lingering presence isn't something you force. It's the natural result of authenticity, confidence, and the weight of your experiences. For those who struggle to be noticed even while they're present, watching your influence persist without effort is infuriating. The reason this cuts deeper than anything you say or do in the moment is because it exposes the difference between substance and performance. Many people rely on noise, attention-grabbing antics, or manipulative behavior to be remembered. They hope their presence leaves an impression, but often it fades the second they step away. You, on the other hand, leave marks that stick, subtle, yet undeniable. That enduring effect is a reminder that influence isn't about being loud, dramatic, or constant. It's about how deeply you connect, how real you are, and how you carry yourself. They feel powerless against this because they can't replicate it. No matter how hard they try, they can't manufacture the type of resonance you create naturally. That makes them resentful, Because your energy continues to affect people long after they've moved on, long after you've stopped engaging. Your presence becomes a benchmark, a standard they can't meet, and that invisibly fuels their jealousy. The truth is, your lasting impact is a reflection of your depth. You've experienced, learned, and grown in ways that give your presence weight. It's not about impressing anyone. It's about existing fully, and that existence leaves ripples behind. People notice it, talk about it, and sometimes even envy it, even if they won't admit it. The fact that your presence resonates after you leave is proof that influence is never about control. It's about authenticity, substance, and the kind of quiet authority that refuses to be ignored. That echo of your energy is proof that your effect isn't temporary or shallow. It lingers, it matters, and it unsettles anyone who's spent their life trying to be remembered without ever truly leaving a mark. Your influence doesn't fade. It persists, and that persistence is unbearable for those stuck in fleeting moments of recognition. Number 10. Your strength doesn't match the resources you have. Your strength doesn't match the resources you have, and that's what makes people so envious without even realizing it. Most people measure power by what you own, what you have access to, or the advantages you were given. They assume that success is proportional to privilege, that results are only meaningful when backed by wealth, connections, or status. Then they look at you, and the equation doesn't add up. You accomplish more with less, create opportunities from scarcity, and transform challenges into victories in ways they can't comprehend. That kind of resourcefulness highlights just how much they rely on external advantages, and it stings. The jealousy comes from the contrast. They've had tools, safety nets, and advantages at their disposal, yet they're stuck trying to make a dent while you thrive with what most would call insufficient. They see your progress and can't reconcile it with their own lack of results. Deep down, they know they could do far better if they had the same tenacity, ingenuity, and courage that you exhibit naturally. That realization makes them uncomfortable because it exposes their dependence on circumstances rather than personal strength. What amplifies their envy is that you make it look effortless. They see you moving through obstacles, building, creating, and influencing, and it seems almost unfair. The truth is, your strength isn't about luck. It's about mindset, persistence, and the ability to turn limited resources into results. Every achievement becomes a silent message. Success isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with what you have. And because they didn't learn that lesson, watching you flourish becomes a source of irritation rather than inspiration. Your ability to do more with less also exposes entitlement. People who have access to abundance often forget how to fight, how to innovate, how to take ownership. Your life reminds them that privilege alone isn't enough to create impact, and that reminder is uncomfortable. You don't just succeed, you redefine what it means to thrive. And in doing so, you make their advantages look wasted, their struggles self-inflicted, and their envy unavoidable. This is why your strength unnerves them. It's not just physical or intellectual. It's a combination of resilience, creativity, and determination that surpasses the limits of circumstance. You thrive where others stumble, and that natural ability to rise without crutches exposes their reliance on what they think matters most. That truth gnaws at them, quietly, persistently, and with growing resentment. Number 11. They're angry that you don't crumble under rejection. They're angry that you don't crumble under rejection because it completely defies their expectations. Most people assume that when doors close, when opportunities slip away, or when people turn their backs, it will shake you, weaken you, or break your spirit. They anticipate seeing you falter, struggle, or beg for what's no longer available. Instead, you respond in a way that exposes their assumptions as laughable. You don't crumble. You don't beg. You don't whine. And you certainly don't let rejection define your value. You simply build new doors, create new paths, and move forward without hesitation. That kind of resilience is infuriating to people who secretly rely on external validation to survive. The jealousy comes from their own vulnerabilities. Deep down, they know that rejection would have left them stuck, bitter, or defeated. They would have counted it as a personal failure, carrying it like a weight they couldn't shake. Watching you rise after setbacks, however, forces them to confront the reality that strength isn't about luck or opportunity, it's about response. Your ability to pivot, rebuild, and keep moving exposes the fragility in their own character, and envy becomes their default reaction because admiration is too humbling. What makes it worse for them is that your resilience isn't performative. You're not showing off, trying to prove anything, or turning setbacks into stories for applause. You're simply living, and your confidence, adaptability, and quiet determination radiate naturally. That effortless mastery of moving past rejection shines a harsh light on how unprepared most people are to handle life's disappointments. They see you turning obstacles into stepping stones while they remain stuck on the first stone, and it makes them feel small and inadequate. Your reaction to rejection also challenges the way they view failure. They've been trained to fear it, to avoid it, and to let it define them. You've transformed it into fuel, a tool for growth, and a signpost to something better. That kind of mindset is impossible to fake and impossible for them to replicate. Your ability to thrive where they would collapse doesn't just make them jealous, it unsettles them. It's a constant, unspoken reminder that survival, success, and strength aren't about avoiding rejection. They're about refusing to be defeated by it. You don't crumble, and that fact alone reveals their insecurity while proving yours. It's silent, undeniable, and utterly infuriating to anyone who hasn't learned how to turn rejection into power. Number 12. You're living proof that spiritual authority outweighs social status. You're living proof that spiritual authority outweighs social status, and that's a reality that unsettles people more than they'd ever admit. In a world where worth is measured by followers, bank accounts, and who you know, your very existence rewrites the script. People are used to seeing influence flow from status symbols, money, titles, networks, or flashy achievements. Yet you show up without any of those props and still command respect, shift atmospheres, and alter the way people think and feel. That kind of power feels unexplainable to them because it doesn't follow the rules they've built their lives around. Your authority isn't dependent on a platform, a paycheck, or a name drop. It comes from a higher alignment, spiritual integrity, authenticity, and a depth of experience that can't be bought. This is what makes you different. While others lean on external markers to feel important, you draw from an inner source that's unshakable. People sense it even if they can't articulate it. They may not understand why they feel calmer, braver, or more convicted in your presence, but they feel it all the same. And because they can't mimic it, they resent it. This is where the uneasiness begins. You expose the fragility of their power. Without their titles, their followers, or their money, many people would feel invisible. You, on the other hand, walk into a space empty-handed, yet carry a presence that feels heavier than everything they've built. It highlights the truth they're trying to avoid. Influence rooted in spirit lasts, while influence rooted in status crumbles the second the status fades. Watching you operate like that makes them quietly fearful, because it forces them to question what their power is really built on. Your life becomes a contradiction to the world's systems. It shows that real authority isn't granted by institutions, money, or popularity. It's born from character, endurance, and alignment with something greater than ego. That's why people get uncomfortable. They've invested everything in the external, only to see you shift entire rooms without lifting a finger. You're proof that true power isn't loud, flashy, or dependent. It's rooted in something eternal. And that kind of power will always make those living off borrowed clout feel small, nervous, and exposed. Number 13. You don't just influence people. You shift their trajectories. You don't just influence people, you shift their trajectories. And that's the kind of effect most people can't even imagine, let alone handle. When someone crosses your path, It isn't simply a moment of inspiration or a fleeting idea. It's a recalibration of how they see themselves, what they think is possible, and the decisions they're willing to make. Your presence, your words, and even your example act like a catalyst, pushing people into paths they wouldn't have considered on their own. That level of influence isn't just noticeable, it's undeniable. And it's the kind of power that quietly terrifies those who rely on influence through manipulation or superficial means. The jealousy arises because what you do can't be bought, faked, or forced. People who wish they had your impact often chase followers, titles, or clout, hoping to create the illusion of authority. You, however, move lives without needing to advertise it. The decisions you inspire, the mindset shifts you spark, and the courage you awaken in others happen naturally, often without you even trying. That's more than simple influence. It's destiny-altering power. And it highlights the emptiness in anyone who has spent their life pretending to matter while achieving little real transformation. What makes it even more infuriating to others is that your effect is lasting. You don't just light a temporary spark. You plant seeds that grow into new directions, new habits, and new realities for the people you touch. They carry your impact long after you've left, and that enduring shift exposes how ineffective their attempts at influence truly are. The comparison isn't flattering, and the resentment builds silently, often hidden behind forced smiles and polite conversation. Your ability to shift trajectories isn't about control. It's about alignment, presence, and the courage to live fully. You've mastered a way of being that changes how people think, feel, and act simply because you embody what most only dream of becoming. That's what makes them jealous. They see results, growth, and transformation spring from your existence, and they recognize that their own attempts, no matter how loud or calculated, will never achieve that kind of ripple effect. Ultimately, you're proof that real power doesn't demand recognition. It creates change that can't be ignored. That kind of impact leaves people inspired, unsettled, and envious all at once, because they realize they can't manufacture what you naturally give. Number 14, your light exposes what they thought was invisible. Your light exposes what they thought was invisible, and that is a kind of power most people don't know how to deal with. Without even trying, you act like a mirror that reflects what's really there, not just the polished image people want the world to see, but the flaws, insecurities, and hidden motives they work hard to conceal. They've built their lives around the belief that their darkness is undetectable, that their bitterness is well disguised, that their insecurities are tucked neatly behind charm or confidence. Then you walk into the room, and something about your presence makes all of it obvious. They don't feel seen. They feel exposed. It isn't that you go around pointing fingers or calling people out. Your authenticity, clarity, and spiritual alignment simply leave no space for pretenses to survive. It's like you carry a frequency that makes masks slip off without warning. The insecurities they've kept hidden start surfacing in their own behavior. Defensiveness, sarcasm, backhanded compliments, or quiet withdrawal. And because they don't understand why they're reacting this way, they frame you as the problem instead of facing the truth that your light is only revealing what was already there. That exposure feels like a threat to them because it disrupts the image they've carefully crafted. In their minds, your presence isn't just uncomfortable. It's dangerous because it forces them to confront parts of themselves they've avoided for years. Shame is a heavy emotion, and for many people it's easier to convert shame into jealousy than to actually heal. So instead of being inspired by you, they resent you. Instead of learning from the light you carry, they label you as intimidating, too much, or self-righteous. What they don't realize is that your light isn't about them at all. It's the result of your own work, your own healing, your own refusal to live behind a mask. But light has one consistent property. It reveals. Whether they like it or not, it shows what's real, what's hidden, and what needs to change. And because you embody that without effort, you become a living contradiction to their illusions. That contradiction provokes jealousy, not because you're trying to expose them, but because deep down they know your presence is a glimpse of who they could be if they were willing to strip away their own darkness. Chosen ones, the truth is undeniable. The world reacts to you not because of chance, luck, or arrogance, but because you exist on levels they can't reach, understand, or replicate. Every step you've taken, every challenge you've overcome, and every version of yourself you've become has left a mark on rooms, on people, on entire paths that intersect with yours. You move through life carrying a presence, an authenticity, and a force that reshapes environments long after you've gone. You don't just influence your survival, your vision, your resilience, and your light. Expose what others have buried inside themselves, whether they admit it or not. They're jealous not because you've done anything wrong, but because your reality makes their limitations impossible to ignore. Your ability to thrive under scarcity, rise above rejection, remain unshakable in the face of doubt, and evolve beyond what they ever dreamed of reveals a truth they cannot manufacture. Power comes from alignment, integrity, and courage, not clout, money, or manipulation. The presence you carry, the influence you wield, and the light you radiate are reminders of what is possible when someone refuses to shrink, conform, or compromise. And here's the ultimate secret. They envy you because your life doesn't depend on them. Your independence, your authenticity, and your unwavering growth make them realize they can never replace you, replicate you, or control you. That's the quiet, brutal truth. You are unstoppable, not because the world bends to you, but because you bend reality itself around the person you've chosen to become. So keep walking your path, keep evolving, and keep shining in ways they can't comprehend. Every glance, every word, every ripple you create leaves proof that you're making more impact than even you realize. They will watch, they will talk, they will envy, but none of it can touch the unstoppable force that is you. You are the storm that rewrites the rules, the light that exposes illusions, and the presence that cannot be ignored. Remember this always. You are not just living. You are reshaping the world around you, one unstoppable step at a time. If this message hit you at your core, make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe to the channel right now and join the movement of chosen ones rising above it all. Smash that like button if you felt this truth in your soul. Comment below with your story or breakthrough, and share this with anyone who needs to see what real impact and resilience looks like. Your voice matters. Your energy matters. And together, we're showing the world what it means to be unstoppable. Don't wait. Subscribe, engage, and step fully into the power you were born to wield. God bless you.